Okay. Can everyone see my screen? My beautiful presentation here, which is really just here as a speaking aid for me. And also to save you all from just staring at my face for, the next hour, which no one wants to do. But yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and letting me talk your ear off for a little bit. I'm really excited to be here talking to you all about subscriptions and memberships. I think this session, it's funny. Uh, I hear a lot of memberships here. I think I'm going to talk both about subscriptions and memberships, probably more on the subscription side. But subscription magic is not alliterative, so we had to go with membership magic. That was the only option. Um, so there we are. Nicole, I'll go through this. Is there anything that you guys usually do with questions? You save them to the end? Do you sort of ask them, throughout?
That's a good question, Jim. We're happy to do whatever is most comfortable for you. What I might recommend is even if we save them to be asked at the end, if folks wouldn't mind dropping them in the chat as they come up. I know sometimes it's hard to remember them throughout, but I'll be responsible for flagging you down at the end and we can ask some questions. Does that seem like a reasonable?
Sounds great. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
feel free to shout at me, during the presentation or whenever. I mean, essentially the structure of how I'd like to do this is to explain a little bit about who I am and why you should be here at all, I suppose. Is to is to sort of talk through what I've learned in terms of loyalty programs like subscriptions and memberships and some of like the overarching themes that underlie success in that arena. And then sort of via two case studies of very different organizations, try and articulate some of the practical strategies that I've found that we found really successful in those. And then my currently I operate a firm called Sector Lab, which is basically just by virtue of the fact that I have a fun last name that can be adapted into lots of things. And I'm going to be presenting some experimentation that I've seen and researched in the sort of loyalty subscription membership space. Just to sort of tag on there. But first, who am I? So, I am the former director of marketing at a little $50 million nonprofit called the Cleveland Orchestra. We were responsible there for about $10 million in revenue generation every year. About a third of that, I would say, came from subscriptions and loyalty programs. Actually, a little bit more, probably about half. Um, so I was there for about 5 years, and that's going to form one half of my sort of case study analysis that I'm going to present. After that, I sort of moved on to what is one of the leading sort of strategy consulting firms in the arts and culture space out of New York. It's a firm called AEA Consulting, where we consulted with organizations spanning everything from small little children's museum experiential concept startups in Kansas City to major government projects in Saudi Arabia. So a pretty wide breadth of organizations and projects and uh, situations there. And then basically since the pandemic, I've been working independently with organizations as like Tuesday Musical, as Cindy pointed out. I've worked with a fairly diverse cohort of about 15 organizations since the start of the pandemic. And part of what I've made my name in a way is sort of the resurrection and growth of these loyalty programs and through subscription campaigns. I've listed some of them here. Everywhere from upstate New York to Houston, Texas to Florida to right here in Cleveland and Akron. Um, you know, I've seen success with a lot of the strategies that I'm going to outline here. But I want to back up for a second because I want to tell you a little bit about why I I reached out to Nicole to do a program like this. And it's because um, 15 years ago, I know I don't look that old, but 15 years ago, I was a even fresher, younger. Um, education and community outreach manager with my hometown symphony and the Albany Symphony in upstate New York. And uh, and as I don't think this is a unique story at all, but I was sort of put in a director of marketing position there. That's about a $2 million organization. And I went to college for music industry. I sort of understood, conceptually what the principles of, marketing were. But as as I've understood now, and you all probably understand, working in nonprofits and working in cultural organizations is pretty niche, and there's a lot of specialized knowledge that goes into that. And I had a lot of ideas for what to do, but no real, they were just that, they were ideas. And thank goodness that within 2 or 3 months of me being hired and put in that role, we hired a consultant ourselves, and they became a mentor and showed me the ropes and helped me understand what works and what doesn't work. And that was transformative for me. I certainly wouldn't be where where I am today without that sort of guidance and leadership. And I think back on that and think, what would I have done if I didn't have that? And so for me, this is an opportunity, I think, for me to do the same and sort of pay that back, because ultimately, like, the bottom line here is that this is hard stuff. Like, it's not easy. There's not really all that many opportunities to learn this kind of thing, and it's hugely important, as I'll show in a few seconds, to the organizations in which you're a part of. I mean, I think, part of my purpose here today, I have three sort of areas that I'm hoping you all will take away from this, is that I believe this is the most important audience segment that you can be developing. As a marketing director, I will, say that flat out. As a executive director, I think that's true too. Is that a loyal segment of audience, whether they be members or subscribers or whatever you want to call them, is the most important audience segment, because for the most part, those people also are your donors, and that's the entry point into donations. So that's really how most of our cultural organizations work. I also want to try and demystify this, because this is one of the hardest areas to gain practical experience, and that's just by virtue of the fact that these campaigns take a long time to work. They're accomplished over a period of many years. And so it's hard to gain that practical experience on the job, as it were, without some sort of evidence of what works other places. Thirdly, I'm hoping that, particularly in the case studies, that you can take away practical tools to improve, like tomorrow, your next campaign in these areas. So I mentioned before, I'm going to go through basically two case studies. One with the Cleveland Orchestra and one with Tuesday Musical. Now, two things about this. These are two very, very different organizations. The Cleveland Orchestra, as I said before, has a $50 million operating budget. And Tuesday Musical has, I don't know, Cindy, you're probably at about $2 million operating budget. Holler at me if I'm completely wrong on that. But these are very, very different organizations. But I picked these because the strategies in which we use to grow subscriptions here are quite similar, if not the same strategies, just scaled to different sizes. At the Cleveland Orchestra, we reversed 10 years of subscription decline, and that's no small feat when there's about 7,000 packages for their core classical season at the time, generating around $3.4 million. With Tuesday Musical, the scale is different, but the impact is the same, where we've doubled now subscriptions over the pre-pandemic levels. That's only about 500 to 600 packages, but it's it's profound because we've grown every year since the pandemic. We actually grew over the pandemic. And this past year was the strongest for new subscriptions that Tuesday Musical has had, uh, at least for the past 10 years. We don't really have data going back further. So, we're gonna call it the best ever, but we can't. Don't check us on it. If you have the data, let me know. So, one thing about this is that just by virtue of the fact that most of my experience is in subscriptions, and these two case studies are powered by subscriptions, is that most of what I'm going to talk about today is subscription based. However, throughout, I've tried to sort of pepper in things that are membership specific that you can take away. But more importantly, I felt that my most profound takeaways through my career have always been in looking at other industries and sort of other models. Because they're sort of beyond the well-trod path of what's normal in our industry, right? And so, actually my current project, my current firm is all about that, to try and import ideas, and strategies and innovations from other sectors like sports or technology or, immersive exhibitions or what have you. Because I find actually those spark my imagination more than just hearing about another successful, orchestra or music ensemble, that's doing things nicely. So I guess just that to say about subscriptions. And if you have any questions sort of as we go through these, please stop me. Okay. So I'm gonna go through now sort of like the loyalty basics boot camp in a way, and then sort of transition to those case studies. So as an arts and cultural organization, I believe that we are essentially in the business of loyalty. Why do I say that? Well, it's because we have an extremely niche product. We don't have sort of an endless stream of patrons to replace those that leave. And in some cases, our products only sort of uh, really relevant to some smaller section of society, right? Or in terms of, who's actually going to come, on a regular basis. Single tickets are highly unreliable. They You have hits, you have misses. It's hard to predict what will be a hit, what will be a miss, and then there's all the other contingencies of whoops, we scheduled that near Super Bowl weekend, and or whoops, like the Browns are in the playoff for the first time in X amount of years, and they're this is a bad weekend for our performance, or there's a snowstorm, or what have you. Subscriptions and memberships end up making that sort of attendance much more consistent and providing reliable revenue, and a much more reliable revenue stream. And it's also the primary pathway to donations. So once you have more stability, it helps the organization, overall. You have more artistic program or artistic freedom to program, right? If you have more dependable revenue through subscriptions. Um, on that point okay, subscriptions, memberships, the primary pathway to sort of donors. I want to show you this slightly overwhelming chart. This was commissioned by the League of American Orchestras about I don't know, 10 years ago. And what you see here is the impact on the propensity to donate. So how likely are you to become a donor based on two factors: frequency, shown on the bottom chart, this sort of x-axis, and tenure with the organization, which is shown by this, I guess it's going away from you, is the z-axis. So what this shows is that frequency is the factor which gets people to donate, much more than much more than tenure. So even if you've been around the organization, involved with the organization for 20 years, um, you know, frequency will still beat you from someone who's coming often, maybe, and has only been with your organization for 2 years. So why is that important? Well, it's because the loyalty mechanisms that we're going to talk about today, subscriptions and memberships, are the drivers of that frequency. And they're the best chance, that entry point into donations. And at least with most of the cultural organizations that I've been around, donations are the primary way that our organizations are funded. It's generally anywhere between, let's see, 60% to 80% of your annual budgets are probably brought in by donations. And so, yeah, as a marketing director, that kind of hurts to hear because, oh, I'm only responsible for about 20% of the revenue. Fun. But this frequency is what gets that other 80%, right? So it becomes incredibly important. And that's why sort of I harp on, we are actually in the business of loyalty, because without this, we're not going to make it. The trick is that it's quite hard to build that loyalty because it's a multi-year process and it's quite fragile, right? So the scary thing is, when I was put in that position as the marketing director, if I did something silly or tried something that, had subscribers go away, it'd take 5 years to get them back, right? So that's quite a scary proposition, and honestly, like, why this stuff is so important and why it has to be sort of an organizationally important goal and driver. When I do my work, I classify organizational income into two buckets, essentially. That which is patron derived and that which is not patron derived. So in patron derived revenue, I'm talking about tickets and donations for the most part, or admissions. Non-patron derived revenue, I'm talking about foundations and grants and corporate support and government support. All of the things in the second bucket can change quite dramatically for reasons that are largely out of your institutional control, and cause huge swings in revenue, right? A foundation might change their funding priorities. Government might pull their funding because, any number of reasons. Corporations might decide that supporting the arts or supporting cultural organizations is not important to them right now. And that can be hugely destabilizing. Patron-derived revenue ends up being the most sustainable source of revenue available to an institution outside of maybe an endowment. Yes, you'll have angel investors. Yes, you'll have people who, yeah, if they leave, they'll make a pretty big impact. But the ability to cultivate a broad set of patrons through tickets, via subscriptions or memberships, and donations will be your most sustainable form of revenue. That's partly because our organizations probably look something like this. On the left-hand side, you have sort of the number of people in each category. Single tickets or admissions probably makes up most of them. Subscriptions or memberships makes up sort of a smaller tier, and then your donors sort of make up, probably the smallest tier of that in comparison. The revenue, though, is probably looking more like the right-hand side. The lines between them might be quite different, but generally, this is sort of what it looks like. Most of your revenue is probably coming through donations. You've got a huge chunk through subscriptions and or memberships, and then, admissions comparatively is quite small. And the problem is that loyalty mechanism has to be the thing that gets them from the bottom here to the top. And sort of the loyalty mechanisms to do that are usually just subscriptions or memberships. Subscriptions, I'm sort of defining as ticket packages, traditional ticket packages. There's a whole range of different sort of subscription, ideas and models. Honestly, when we think about subscriptions today, we might be thinking more of Disney Plus and Netflix. But here I'm talking more about, ticket packages and, discounts on buying 3 or 4 or 5 performances, and then memberships, where you become an annual or monthly member to an organization. The interesting thing about this actually is that the research that I've seen on these two loyalty mechanisms indicate that actually memberships are quite a bit easier in a way to get than subscriptions. but are much harder to get to that next step of donations. Uh, and that may be because, I mean, getting a subscriber is really, really hard. But once you're in, it's a little bit easier to transition you to that next step. So just sort of I don't know, a little mention about that in terms of what I've seen about the comparison between the two. Uh, when I talk about subscriptions, you inevitably get the question of, well, everything that I've read is that subscriptions are dead. They're not worth doing anymore. Why are we, so my experience disproves that in a way. I think that, in what might be a better thing to put here is, well, if I think I think we're really good at killing subscriptions, but I don't think they're quite dead, and I don't think as a industry we can survive subscriptions being dead, because look at the relative value. This is sort of pulled from Tuesday Musical, of a single ticket versus a renewing subscriber. So this is just the math. The cost of sale, the cost to acquire a single ticket, is somewhere between 25 to 45% of the dollar that they bring in. And actually, that can be quite a bit higher. It can go up to 60 or 70% of the dollar that they bring in through revenue. The attrition rate, and this is pretty common, is generally higher than 80%. 80% of those people are leaving after they've attended once. And that is something that, is not a Tuesday Musical statistic. That's a statistic sort of industry wide among the performing arts. Um, the average revenue per ticket is around $37. The number of seats filled is one. And you compare that to a renewing subscriber, where the cost of sale is 2 to 5%. The attrition rate is under 20%. The average revenue obviously is much higher, around $180, because they're filling an average of 5.46, 5.5 seats. So we can't really argue with that math. It's cheaper to acquire, they stay around longer, they have higher average revenue, and they're more consistently attending. So ultimately, like, we can't afford to lose the subscription model. It's hard to get subscribers. It's much higher cost of sale to get a new subscriber than 2 to 5%. But once they're in, they're a really good deal for the institution. So before I get into sort of the case studies of, okay, well, great, how do I get those? I want to talk a little bit about, there's a foundational element uh, here, that you can have the best subscription campaign in the world, but if you're undermining your loyalty at your organization, then it's not going to do all that much. So what are the prerequisites to having a successful loyalty campaign? So one of the things that I see quite often, well, actually, hold on, I'm going to go through all these first. So, the activities, in which you're, are you detracting or enhancing loyalty? There's a pricing consideration of, is coming more often incentivized? Is there a demand for it? Is the perception okay? Is it worth it from a benefit standpoint? And then, are you cultivating patrons who are ready to go into sort of these loyalty programs, either subscription or membership? On the activities front, what I see quite often is there's a lot of uh, activities that detract from, becoming more loyal. So, for example, we're a week out of the concert or a week out of the event, and it's not selling, so we end up doing deep discounting to fill seats. Well, in a way, that deep discounting is punishing all of the people who bought early, and the people who bought earliest are generally, in performing arts, the subscribers. So that ends up sort of being a negative effect on the value of subscription when you go back to them in a couple months and say, well, you could have all of these concerts for 20 to 30% off, when they think, well, you just ran a 50% off sale for all the people, wanted to come the day before the concert, right? Um, you know, there's a lot of organizations that uh, I work with that aren't very thoughtful about their discounting programs, it will often discount things under what subscriptions are getting or members are getting, right? So that impacts the loyalty formula here. There's a lot of people in the sort of desperation to get new subscribers that end up making new subscription and membership promotions much better than sort of the loyal 5 to 10 year subscribers. And then there's sort of a lack of consideration planning. So are we offering pre-sales to members? Are we offering pre-sales to everyone? Is there sort of a thought in here of let's engage with our loyal audience first before we throw it to everyone on our database? From a pricing standpoint, I can't tell you the number of organizations that I work with who have subscription programs in which I've seen it's actually slightly more expensive to be a subscriber, or maybe the discount's out of whack, which is kind of crazy, but it does happen because oftentimes these things are just carried over and then the prices change and the subscription prices stay the same. And then all of a sudden, subscribers are actually paying a little bit more. There's also sort of, if the goal is frequency, and we know that is the primary driver of donations, one of the strongest ways to increase that frequency is to incentivize it through price. So that's another way to sort of build that sort of foundation of a successful loyalty campaign, whether it's membership or subscription. Perception. Is there a demand for it? Does this feel like a successful organization? I can't tell you how many organizations that I work with that have hall maps that look like this. And again, this is a very performing arts example. This is not Tuesday Musical, by the way. This is an organization which will remain unnamed. But you see sort of a hall map here, the stage is up here, and they have sort of stratified price zones like this. This is sort of a heat map of what the most frequently sat in seats looked like. And you see these sort of the redder seats are more often sat in. And you see these sort of big gulfs between where seats are sat in and where seats are not sat in. And what happens is that you have all these people sitting back here that actually aren't helping your perception, way up in the front and where these seats are visible. So we end up sort of doing a lot of, restructuring of pricing to make sure that the events that we're promoting and trying to sell on subscriptions are actually successful or look successful, even if it's the same number of people. If you sort of squeeze them into a certain section of the house, it looks more successful and drives that sort of subscription or membership message home. Benefits, is it worth it? We look often at what objections people might have to joining a membership or a subscription program and design benefits to get around those objections, and to deepen their engagement with the mission and with the institution. Because ultimately, a lot of these programs, a lot of these membership and subscription programs, people identify with them. They become part of who they are, part of their identity. And so a lot of times this is helping them see them as part of their identity.
Jim, do you have an example of that? I'm trying to think of what that might look like.
A really, really good example is parking.
Yeah.
So
that was the one that I was wondering about.
yeah, I mean, ends up being a huge benefit wherever we're building these programs. Regardless of how easy the parking actually is comparatively. And then the last element here is cultivation. So, one of the things we said earlier was that single tickets churn at very high rates. What's actually interesting is that there's some research that's been done that shows that the average visitation cycle of people to cultural organizations is around 27 months, right? Oftentimes we're looking at things in terms of seasons, right? Because that's how we're organized, or years, because that's how, a common way of looking at sort of how your organization is doing. But out in the real world, patrons on average are attending once every 27 months, if they're a patron. Actually, for performing arts is a little more. It's about 33 months. And so a lot of times the strategies to get them to be a good subscription prospect, uh, is getting them to come twice within that 27-month period, right? To have them come more than the average patron. So that's an industry-wide issue. But the two sort of levers to try and cultivate them so that they can be sort of captured as a membership or a subscriber, is through making the experience great, and is through pre and post communication, and making sure that there's a next step for them as soon as they walk out of the hall, walk out of your venue, and that they're prepared before they walk in. One sort of little note from the donor fundraising side, uh, there was some research done that said that if you're given a personal thank you, not an automated email, but a personal thank you within 48 hours of giving a donation, it increases the likelihood to give again, by 400%. Because the primary reason of why donors stick with you, has been shown to be a good customer service experience. And in a lot of ways, this is the same thing on the membership ticket subscription side. One final element, I won't take too much time on this, but this is just sort of a bugaboo of mine, is that, okay, well, let's just use comps to get more people in. There's been quite a bit of research done that shows that, actually these free and deeply discounted tickets don't bring in new audiences, don't attract lower income individuals, which is often sort of why these programs are put in place, and don't often lead to repeat attendance, and do negatively impact organizational perception, whether people actually show up or not. And they detract from early buying and that long-term loyalty and visitor satisfaction. Okay, so that's sort of the sort of foundation for loyalty and why loyalty is important. Let's sort of dissect some of these campaigns, which is just an excuse to use this fun image, and is just a reminder to myself that I need a cool hat like that. Oh, sorry. So the campaign structure of how we accomplish this growth with Tuesday Musical and Cleveland Orchestra, looks something like this with both campaigns. There was sort of a season announcement. There's a period of getting renewals, getting renewed subscribers back with a deadline, and then a long period of acquisition before the season began. We built this off of a sort of pricing and packaging model that, as I said before, incentivized people to buy more and come more frequently. So for Tuesday Musical, we sort of set levels at 6, 4, and 3. We set discount levels that were sort of gave you different savings based on how many concerts you attended. And honestly, at the Cleveland Orchestra, it was the same way. The Cleveland Orchestra is much more complex because there was, you're talking about how many concerts on different days of the week. You could have even a 23 concert subscription package if you wanted to, or a 3 concert package, but it was essentially sort of the same model. If we go back to, oh, sorry, one other thing on that. We heavily, in both instances, but just highlighting it with Tuesday Musical, one of the things that we really work at in pricing these is how we can use these sort of pricing to create a sales message or a demand message here. So, a 3 concert package at a $19, I think, starting price, save when you save 10%, ends up being a starting price of around $49. So being able to dispel one of the objections around coming to a classical music or a music series is, well, won't it be as expensive? It's useful to have a tool like a starting price like that. On the 6 concert front, you know, the saving 20% is essentially the equivalent of getting one concert free, and you better believe that we promoted the heck out of that as well. Going back to sort of the campaign structure, what that looks like in terms of revenue inevitably looks something like this. So this is a sort of genericized tracker of when revenue comes in across a subscription renewal campaign. So you end up having most of your revenue come in through the renewal portion of the campaign, and then sort of a steady uptick as you go through the acquisition phase of the campaign. So the way that we've made these campaigns successful is a uh, really focused renewal campaign, because as you see here, it really drives the entire performance of the campaign. If you have a bad renewal campaign, it's really hard to recover. That makes sense because that should be the easiest segment to convert, right? Because they've been with you before, and hopefully they just need to check yes on a box. The other sort of element that we've learned from both of these campaigns is that the more time that you'll have to sell, the more that you'll end up selling, because the longer that you can make this sort of portion of the graph, the more that you're able to sort of leverage that acquisition campaign and bring more people in. So we end up trying to push back the start date of when we run these things as early as we possibly can. We work on targeting the right people. So again, those people who've attended twice or more are trying to, the rest of the year, maximize how many people have tried twice or more, and hit them with more than one mailing. So in other words, at Tuesday Musical and at the Cleveland Orchestra, we're not doing a single brochure and mailing it out. We're producing multiple versions of the same brochure. And we're doing that by promoting the larger packages first, because you save the most money and it's the best deal with those packages, and then rolling into the smaller packages later. So we're not sort of, that accomplishes 2 things. We're not sort of blasting you with a whole bunch of offers right away that you're going to have to choose from, because that's been shown to drive down responses when you're presented with a whole bunch of options. And secondly, we believe strongly that it's in your interest to come to the larger package, because you'll save a better deal and you're experiencing more of our product, which is, of course, awesome. So we make sure that we're selling the large packages. A lot of organizations I found sort of shy away from that because they're just harder to sell, and they're harder things to sort of get for new patrons. But by selling them, we've seen a lot of great results. We utilize demand messaging, so we're not saying, we hope that you'll come and experience the season, but we're using that, buy 6 for the price of 5, and it starts at $49 type of message, because it works really well. We're using a lot of direct mail in both cases. Email is a really good supplement, but we're still finding direct mail is really successful. So this campaign structure ends up looking something like this. Last year, we started in the end of March, and you can sort of see each of these represents sort of a hit with mailings, and then acquisition is much more sort of spaced out about once a month. So if we look at renewals, we were in touch about every 2 weeks. We were in touch with personalized mailers that were sent first class. We focus heavily on upgrading people to that largest package, so not just trying to renew them into the packages they have had before. And we were leveraging, more at the Cleveland Orchestra than Tuesday Musical, but all of our assets, right? So the box office, in reaching out to subscribers who hadn't renewed, and a development team, even though their role was not in subscriptions, a lot of their donors were, and so trying to sort of give them the white glove treatment to come back. We personalized everything. So here is sort of an excerpt of Tuesday Musical's renewal invoice. And so this was for a specific person, and you'll see we tried to pre-fill as much as we could here, right? So we're showing them what their price is, but not only that, we're showing them what they're saving on the regular prices. We're pre-filling in how many seats they had based on last year. We're pre-filling in what their seating choice is. We're adding it all up for them so that ultimately, like, my goal is just to get them to check a box and fill in their credit card information and send it back to make it as easy as humanly possible. That's all done, by the way, with just a mail merge, so it's not all that hard to do. In an upgrade strategy, we did this in both cases. So if you were a 3-concert subscriber for Tuesday Musical in the previous year, we were asking you to jump up to the 6-concert package and showing you sort of what the equivalent, what the benefit of doing that was. I found that if you offer the upgrade and they don't take it, they still come back at higher rates to the packages they had before than if you just ask them to renew their straight package. At the Cleveland Orchestra, we had a pretty complex sort of upgrade path. You'll see here sort of all of the different packages. They're named such lovely names as the Thursday T1 package and the Saturday B1 package. And those just denote sort of how many concerts are in them. But we're trying to push people up through these and doing that with incentives. This is a really bad picture of one of the upgrade invoices that we sent. But you'll see here is that, we are saying we recommend this package, and you're sitting here and your price is this, and added together that would be this, and you'd save this much on tickets. And if you do that, we have an incentive to send you to get you to convert. And that ended up driving upgrades to, I think, 15 or 20%, which was a huge deal to get them coming more frequently. Again, even at the Cleveland Orchestra, this was all a mail merge, and it was a really complex mail merge, but it was still a mail merge where, I think anyone who has some sort of faculty with Microsoft Excel and Word can accomplish something like this. On renewals and membership, one of the things that we found is that actually this is sort of some statistics from a national research organization on why do members not renew. One of you look at the top 3 categories here of I intend to renew when I visit next, or I forgot, or I'm actually not aware that I'm a lapsed member. Something to be really concerned with like the visitor journey and how people are sort of coming back. Nicole, I'm running pretty short on time. I can go through the last couple of slides. Is that okay, or should I?
Why don't we pause and see if anybody has questions for you? I don't think we had any come in the chat, but is there anything that is specific to your organization that you wanted to make sure that we got in? And then if those of you who have the ability to stay after, we could maybe go through the final slides, but it might be a good chance to pause and hear from folks. So what questions do you have at this point?
I don't have any questions necessarily, but I do have a comment just about this. You had mentioned before that like subscriptions were dead, like people think subscriptions are dead, but do you think there is a place for creating a more interesting subscription model? Like I've noticed we do some performances, but we certainly aren't in the subscription game. That's not Akron Soul Trains, although I could be interested in that because we do support performing artists. But do you see that maybe subscriptions are moving more to some of those like Netflix models where like if you pay a monthly subscription and you go to 2 shows, or do you find that there's more success in that kind of subscription model versus the traditional like buy 8 concerts or whatever?
Yes and no. So I found that uh, for certain organizations, that makes more sense to do a model like that. And indeed, there's actually benefits to having that sort of recurring like Netflix style revenue stream in that it shows a really high renewal rate and retention rate just naturally because with a traditional subscription at a certain point you're asking them whether they want to leave or not with a renewal period, and with a recurring revenue stream like that you don't really have that. That's why people sort of forget about those. Oh yeah, I have a subscription to Netflix, I'll cancel that someday. um what we instituted a few of those at the Cleveland Orchestra, um, which obviously has a really robust subscription program, and ended up finding that those things ended up appealing just to different people. There were some people who wanted that on their calendar and wanted the seats and wanted it sort of set in advance so they didn't have to worry about it anymore. And there was some people who just really wanted that flexibility with a more monthly subscription option. So my answer is for some organizations, the monthly subscription, model, which is sort of straddling the line between a membership and a subscription, as traditionally defined, um, makes more sense. Other at organizations that are sort of really well established, I've just found that they appeal to different people, and so they're just different tools to achieve the same ends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peta. Any other questions or thoughts that we want to make sure we get answered today? Okay, Jim, I'll let you finish up your slides. We'll still give another opportunity for questions at the very end, but I know some of you are going to have to jump off in about 90 seconds. So I wanted to make sure we at least gave you the opportunity while we were all still together. So Jim?
Awesome. All right. And if you do have to jump off and want these slides later, or I guess you have the recording as well, then there's that. But don't ever hesitate to reach out to me also if you have any other questions as well. Yeah, I thought I'd go through this a lot faster, but because I just like hearing myself talk. Um, so I don't actually have that many left on the acquisition front. So how do we get new people? What we found was that, frequent mailings that are really highly targeted work the best for us. And the way that we did this, particularly with Tuesday Musical and a very limited budget, was to keep the pieces relatively small and static and change out the covers or change out sort of the core message. So here's an example of at the Cleveland Orchestra where we're having essentially one letter, but we're changing out the message based on your activity with us, whether you're a donor, whether you're a multi-ticket buyer, whether you are a build your own subscriber and we're trying to get you into a fixed seat package, or whether you lapsed a couple years ago and we're trying to get you back. All of these are sort of just segmented messages trying to achieve the same thing and speak to your situation. On the Tuesday Musical front, here's sort of one example of a brochure. So notice this isn't a brochure where we talk about every single thing that we do. This is a really hyper targeted brochure that is designed to get you to do something. And that is to subscribe, and not even just to subscribe, but to subscribe to our 6-concert series, right? We're not giving you a whole bunch of options. And so, later on, we could just sort of switch out the cover or do a slightly, smaller piece and get uh, get the increase our ability to mail lots of these frequently. And here's an example of how we did that with the Cleveland Orchestra. Again, these two are the same piece. These two are the same piece. This is a different piece on the inside, but the covers are all different. So again, this isn't a big gaudy brochure about everything we do that sits on the coffee table and looks really nice and is proofed by the board and everyone loves it and the music director is, gaga over it. These are marketing tools that that we produce for a specific purpose. And ultimately, like, the trick here though is that none of this is able to be accomplished in a short time frame. I'm gonna skip ahead here. So one of the things that we asked earlier was, how do you deal with objections? And I want to sort of show this. This is something we've done, and we've done a variation with this with Tuesday Musical as well, but just an ability to meet some of the objections to, why you might not want to consider a program, a membership or a subscription like this head on. So, well, I'm concerned about flexibility and the ability to be locked into these dates. Well, we address that head on with a message about exchanges. And so how are we sort of packaging that? Well, we're trying to package it as a testimonial here, or the fact that why am I being locked into programs that I might not choose in a lot of ways? Well, it's because there's an ability to discover new works that you might not have known that you'd be a fan of, or that it is nice to get your concerts on your calendar. So we're working on trying to address those objections in these pieces, and you better believe on the website as well, within the material in which they're considering it. All right, the last thing I had to go through was actually something that was just brought up, was sort of, let's let's talk a little bit about experimentation in the subscription space. So I want to talk about two experiments we ran with, again, two different organizations, the Cleveland Orchestra and a flamenco dance company in New York City, which is pretty awesome. And you should check out flamenco next time that you're looking to do something, because it's pretty amazing. But in both of these instances, we ran one of these things that straddles, I think, the line between subscriptions and memberships. And that is sort of this monthly Netflix style subscription. So where you sign on and you get certain benefits for a monthly charge that comes off your card. What we found here is that these programs have actually pretty good acquisition. They're easy to try, right? It's easy to try out something that's $20 a month than if we were asking you to pay $250, or no, $240 a year. That would be the equivalent of $20 a month for something you're not quite sure about, right? There's a psychological safety valve there of, well, if I don't like this, I can leave. We found that to be really powerful. And then they ended up having great renewal rates, right? They're just easy to sort of stay on, particularly if your experience is a good one. So that's another sort of reason to make that experience awesome. We found that to be really successful too. We've done this in two ways, where you structure the event. So there's a set event every month or every other month, or you can choose the events. Both of those, seem to be quite successful. The challenge is that you still kind of have to convert them after you sell them into it. So they still have to attend things. So it's kind of, that frequency job is still on your plate. But it ended up being, a good sort of midpoint step to get there. Again, one of the interesting things we found was that these are sort of more behaviorally oriented. There were still some people who wanted subscriptions and wanted their seats picked out and wanted these things on their calendar, which was kind of interesting. And in both of these cases, we made a concerted effort to focus on building community among our members. And one of my big takeaways was that actually was in itself a huge positive, in that that community that was found among the membership ended up being a really strong retention tool. It's a lot harder to leave an organization. It's it's a lot easier to leave an organization than it is to leave a bunch of your friends, which we actually had even one person get married that met each other through a membership program like this. So that was a sort of an experimentation on that sort of loyalty front, on the sort of membership subscription front, that I found really interesting and wanted to sort of share in this context. So yeah, that sort of wraps me up, I suppose. So any questions or comments, or damn it, Jim, you were too long. What the heck?
Thank you so much, Jim. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And thank you everybody for joining us today.